Okay, we're going to try again to explain how we built this little mini spinner with just these parts: mirror, a little waver toy, solar powered waver toy here, USB cable, and PVC. Let's get it set up here. Just a second. You start with the waver toy, such as this one here. It comes apart at the bottom. There's a circular flat base to it. You just put a little screwdriver in there and it pops right open. And once you get inside of it, this is what you'll see. You'll see a coil, a solar panel. Underneath the solar panel there's a little circuit board. This is the circuit board down here, and on the circuit board the largest thing you can see is this capacitor. Let me back up just a little bit, make sure I've got everything in the picture. This capacitor, okay, there we go. The whole trick to using the innards of this toy is from this circuit board. There's two large wires that run to the solar panel, these white wires. There's two very small tiny wires that run to the coil. The coil is glued to the flat base. What we're going to do is take the capacitor on the circuit board and glue it, the other end of it, right in the middle of the coil. That will keep these tiny wires from getting broken. First we're going to cut off the wires to the solar panel. Okay, so that's just another view showing these very tiny wires that you have to protect very carefully the whole way through. Another thing that you may run into when you're looking at it, you may think one of the tiny wires broke. This is what I call a wile hair. You would expect the wires, the tiny ones, to come up to the circuit board. The black dots are the solder spots. And sometimes they just lay the wire across that and just solder it. So you'll see a little tiny wire sticking out and you think, oh, my wire's broke. No, that's what I call a wile hair. That's very common. Okay, so this part of the capacitor is what we're going to glue right in the middle of the coil. And here it's glued. I'm going to show the type glue to use later, but please use the type glue I recommend later. And then we're going to take 10 snips, and let me back up one. We're going to come in straight lines around this coil to cut it off this plate. So you can basically make a square around it. Be very careful. We're going to push those little wires out of the way gently, make sure they're not in the way, and cut carefully so we don't break anything. We use 10 snips to do that. When we get through, we have something that looks like this. We'll put that aside for now and keep going. Now we're going to take a USB cord, and the recommended cord has a cloth type covering here. We're going to strip that back. Inside there's 4 wires. We're only going to use the black and the red, so we're going to cut the other 2 off. And it's a little bit frayed here, so what I'm going to do is use some electrical tape to keep that fray down, because I'm going to put heat shrink there just to make it look nice and to make a tapered thing. We're going to put this through the hole in the PVC. Okay, so I've cut the other 2 wires off and I've stripped off some of the insulation. Okay, now I've got some heat shrink back here that's ready to go. This is electrical tape holding the frayed part down so that the heat shrink can come all the way up. Couldn't actually get it on there without the electrical tape. Now the heat shrink is back, it's ready. We'll slide it down heat it up and make this nice neat looking thing to put in the hole in the PVC. There, it's kind of tapered, that fits in the hole good, and when we glue it, it'll help us to snug it up. Okay, so we're going to drill a hole in the PVC. That's for the USB cable to go into. Okay, here the USB cable has gone through the PVC. We glue it from the inside. Here you can use super glue. That's the only place I would say to use super glue in this whole build. Don't use it in other places. Okay, we want to make sure that we had enough wire stripped off that the wire can come from the hole all the way through the tube and stick out about 2 inches. We're going to need that much play to work with. This is okay, we're skipping to what we're going to do with the mirror now. The mirror is what they call a blind spot mirror. It's very easy to take apart. This notch up top, you can put a nail in there, pop this back right off, you get right to the lens. You don't have to break any plastic to get to it. That's what the lens looks like, or mirror, lens, whatever you can call it, when you take it out. We are also going to, let me back up a second. It has a coating that makes it look like a mirror on this side. We're going to use a soft steel wool and take that coating off until we get down to a clear lens. You can just use the clear lens, or you can do like I do and put a mirror coating on the other side. Okay, basically what we're doing, the original mirror had a coating on that side and it looked like a mirror from that side. We're going to use it in this direction, and we have to take off their coating to make it smoother for the magnets to spin up there. And I add a mirror effect spray paint on this side over here, which is optional. You don't have to do that. Okay, here's the clear lens. I spray paint it with the mirror effect spray paint. Okay, now we're on to putting some other parts together. We've already run the USB cable through the PVC. We got the wire sticking out. I've got a little holder cup over here just to hold this coil and circuit board up so I can get these wires on the same level, get ready to solder them. And I'm putting heat shrink on there first before I solder them. Always double check the polarity on the circuit board, because you had 2 white wires coming off. One's going to be positive, one's negative. You need to make sure, let me back up here a second. We've got a red wire and a black wire, so we got to get the black wire to negative, the red wire to positive. Okay, we've double checked that. I solder the red and the black wires. Then the heat shrink is sunk down in the PVC. It'll come back up in a second. Okay, I put it in place and heat it up, so now we have it heat shrinked. Okay, now I'll move the whole assembly over to another table where I'm going to do some gluing. Again, my holder cup is here just to hold this part, the circuit part, up. And I'm going to put the mirror underneath that circuit part. So here's the mirror sitting underneath the circuit part. And we're going to glue the edge of the coil just a tad away from the exact center of the mirror. That's where you want to glue it. And again, you need to make sure, give this glue 2 or 3 hours to dry once you've done that. Okay, there it's drying on top of the mirror. Okay, next we're going to put that glue around the top of the PVC, and we're going to put the circuit board on top with the mirror. The mirror fits right on top there, and you can actually go through, because the PVC has an opening in the bottom. You can just gently pull on the wires to help pull this in there. The good thing about the glue, I recommend you can have a cloth handy and just clean up all the excess stuff. It'll come right off. You can get a nice clean look there, especially if you want to paint the thing afterwards. Okay, that's the nice clean look. Cleaned up the glue, excess glue. Then I decided I'm going to paint the thing. So here's the PVC with the mirror facing down. Okay, and I've used masking tape around the USB cord, and we'll just paint it up here. Okay, it's ready to paint. So there's the spray paint. I use a different type spray paint on that. It's mentioned in the parts at the end of the video. And just to recap what we've done here, we've got a PVC container, we've got a USB cord that goes through a hole, the white wires off the circuit board connect to the red and the black from the USB cord. The capacitor on the circuit board is glued onto the coil, which is then glued onto the mirror. And we'll talk about the magnets to use and the sizes here in a second. These are some suggested sizes for the magnets. Doesn't have to be exactly this, but this is a good starting point. And you can buy them on eBay or different places. Spherical neodymium magnets. Okay, here's some of the parts. This is the glue to use. Okay, I got this in a 99-cent store. Also, if you want to use gutter sealant, that'll work also. This is a different one showing the part number a little bit better on that glue. Okay, the metallic Rust-Oleum spray paint I use for the PVC. The mirror effect Rust-Oleum I used to put the new mirror look on the what we'll call a lens that was originally a mirror. This doesn't make a perfect mirror on the curved surface, but it at least gives it a pretty good look. This blind spot mirror that we used for our lens slash mirror, I got at the 99-cent store. You want to get this type that has the thicker casing that I think I showed before. You don't want to get the ones that are very flat because they're almost impossible to get the lenses out of their case. This is the PVC part. It's available at Home Depot. Very cheap. Also, if you're going to spray paint it, you notice there's a manufacturing divot in most of these. If you want to drill your hole right into that divot, it won't show up and mess up your paint job. This is the heat shrink I used for the small wires from the USB to the circuit board. This is the heat shrink I used to make the tapered connection of the USB going into the hole in the PVC. This is the USB cord I got at the 99-cent store. And this is the soft steel wool. You want to use soft steel wool to remove the coating from the original mirror. Let me play some videos real quick here, short, and these may have a little bit of choppiness in them. I apologize for that. This is just showing me using the steel wool to start taking off the coating on the original mirror. Once you get the middle part done in your hand, you need to use some towel, set it down on a hard surface to get the edges real good. And then at the very end, you may have to take it under the sink and use the steel wool with some water to finish getting it clear. This is showing me going in. I'm going to cut the solar panel off the base of one of these toys. And again, I don't do this as carefully as I would do because I'm filming. The camera's a little bit in the way, so normally I'd be a little bit slower and more careful, but I just wanted to show a little bit of this preparation, cutting the solar panel off. And also, I forgot to mention, at some point I go in there on those white wires and grab the bottom of them, usually after everything's glued, and use my teeth to strip off a little bit of that wire to work with on the circuit board. Wire strippers really will not work good on that. Okay, now the gooey glue I'm going after right now, I'm just going to put a big gob of it on that capacitor that's on the circuit board. Of course, my hand's in the way. It'll get out of the way in a second. Okay, big gob of glue there, and that capacitor goes right in the center of the coil carefully down. And again, the whole time you're doing this, you got to be careful not to stretch those tiny fragile wires too far. Once that's down there, then you let that dry for a good period of time. Last thing I'm going to show here, I'm getting ready to cut the coil off the plastic base. The white wires are a little bit more sturdy. You can just kind of push them up out of the way. And then the tiny little fragile wires, gently push them up, so when you start cutting the base of the toy with the tin snips, you don't cut or damage those little wires. And I'm going to go out of frame here for a second, but it'll be back in just a second. And you can see what I'm doing here in just about 1 second here. Okay, here comes the tin snips, and I'm keeping my eye on those little wires, make sure I don't get near them. You don't want to get too close to the coil. Basically cut straight lines, make a square. And again, I would probably have done this a little slower and more careful, but I have the camera in the way and I was trying to speed it up. And when you finish cutting the square or almost square around that coil, you can always use the tin snips to carefully trim it up to make it look a little bit better. But again, it's going to be inside the device, nobody's going to see it. You don't have to have a perfect circle of that base around the coil.